It doesn't start until 9:30, right?
No, it's starting right now.
Oh, let's.
I guess because they're all standing in there in the meeting room. Or sitting in the meeting
Good
room.
morning.
They're standing.
What?
See, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
There we go. Kelly, you still got just a few jumping in.
No problem. I see Tara Rubio is on.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to A Way Home for Tulsa training. If you're not familiar with A Way Home for Tulsa, that is Tulsa's continuum of care that works to address housing and homelessness. And we'd love for you to be part of those meetings. Our next one is on September 12th at 1:30. If you're interested in learning more, you can find out more on the Housing Solutions website. There's a link at the top that says A Way Home for Tulsa. Those meetings are open. And so anyone who is working with people experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity is welcome to come to those or tune in. If you would like a meeting invite with a virtual link, just send me a quick message, quick email, and I'll make sure you get it. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kelly Wilson.
All right. Thank you, Erin. Good morning, everyone. I am so glad that you are here today. I'm really happy that so many people signed up for this training and that you guys are joining because it really, I think it just speaks to the need that we all have to be very aware of our own mental health needs, our own self-care and personal care. And so it's something that, you know, we work in a not very easy industry. So it is very common that we need to find some better ways to take care of ourselves. And so we'll get into all that. But just to give you a little bit of background on me, as Erin said, I'm Kelly Wilson, and I currently work for the Tulsa Day Center. So I think most of you guys are probably familiar with the Day Center, but we're a day center, but we also are a night shelter. We have about 70 to 80 people who stay with us overnight. And then we have a capacity of up to about 300 to come in during the day. And so, you know, naturally that changes with the seasons and things that are happening, but we probably average about 250 people per day coming into the shelter. And that's not including the ones who stay overnight with us. So that's a separate about 250 people. And so that's where I am currently. I've been working in the social work field for about 7 years now, I believe. So prior to that, I'm going to tell you about my prior career, and I'm going to tell you about it because it's going to come into play later on. But so before coming into social work, I worked I was a commercial banker for like 26 years. Spent a long time. It was a great career. I loved it. Taught me a lot of things. But that career is what actually led me into a social work career because while I was working for Bank of America, I started serving on the board of directors for Mental Health Association. And it was through that I started to see the amazing things that the nonprofits do in our city. And I started coming into contact with people who I've just never seen passion like that before. The passion for the mission, the passion for the people we serve, really struck a chord with me. And so from there, I just really started to learn as much as I could. Knew that that's really what I wanted to be doing my next career. And so was able to retire from banking and go back to school and get my master's degree and come start doing things like this. And I'm so glad that I did. But I make that point because I want you guys to know that this passion that we see in all of our coworkers, all the folks that work for nonprofits, it is so impressive and it is so amazing. It also can be a double-edged sword. That passion can also be the thing that can keep us from being our very best when we're working with our clients. And so we'll dig in to that. So what I want to say though, before I get too far into it, this is a safe space. Okay, so say what's on your mind. There is no judgment here. I would like if you guys will share some of your stories, maybe pop them into the chat, or later we can open up and kind of share some stuff. But I want to make sure that you all know this is a very safe space. Don't be afraid to share your feelings. Excuse me. So the next thing that I want to do, so everybody just pull out a piece of paper. It can be a scrap piece of paper or whatever. I'm going to say a word, and I want you guys to write down your very first emotional reaction to it, and then hang on to that because we're going to talk about it later. But so the word is self-care. So what is the first emotion that came to mind when I said the word self-care? So let's take a minute to do that, and then, okay. So I want to kind of start by talking about some of the misperceptions about compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue can very easily be confused with burnout. And there's a good reason for that. They're both, they're both significant and serious things that we face in both the nonprofit sector. Compassion fatigue you don't see in the for-profit sector, but for the nonprofit sector, you'll see it a lot. Both burnout and compassion fatigue have a very serious impact on our personal lives and our professional lives. They both include emotional and physical symptoms, and they have some similar warning signs. So it's kind of easy to confuse the two. And so we'll kind of go through and kind of talk about what the differences are between the two. And it's important to know the difference between burnout and compassion fatigue, because the more we know about what we're dealing with, the better we're going to be able to deal with it. And so the more understanding we can gain about what we're experiencing, the more able we're going to be able to deal with it and find some healthy ways to help ourselves. So the difference between compassion fatigue and burnout is really the cause of the thing. It's really how those things originate. So burnout is it's the result of a stressful workplace. So things like being overworked, having a toxic work environment, working long hours, having a poor work culture. This is something that kind of gradually builds over time. You know, you've probably met these people, and I was one of them too. You know, you jump into a career and you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna knock this out. And you've got so much ambition and you want to do so many things, and you know you're capable of it. And so you just throw yourself into it, really get after it. And, you know, after a while, that stress starts to build up on you. You know, it becomes, you're still ambition, but you kind of lose that drive to be able to get there because you're exhausted and you're mentally exhausted. You know, it's just kind of something that comes on over time. And then before you know it, you're starting to realize that your job has taken over your life, and you've neglected some of your other things. Certainly burnout happens in the nonprofit world too. So it kind of applies to both. But in the for-profit sector, you aren't probably going to see compassion fatigue. And that's what I really want to talk about today. The origins of compassion fatigue are really all about it's helping others. It is us being exposed to the trauma that other people have experienced that we're working with. And it is highly impactful. And it is something that, you know, if you think about it, compassion is probably what drove us to get into this career. We care for people very deeply. We care about our communities. We care about all of the things that are taking place in our world. And so, you know, if you think about it, it's very easy to take on other people's problems, you know. So we're placed in these positions to try to help people. And we usually do a great job of it, but we also have to remember that when they do that trauma dump, and they do that a lot, you know, they've got a lot of trauma, it can start affecting us. It can start making us feel like we are the one who has suffered the trauma, and that's very common. It is something that it can be a rapid onset. You can have something really traumatic happen while you're working with a client. So it can be something that you feel very quickly. It also can be something that evolves over time. You know, it's something that can build up on you, and you may not even see the warning signs. Okay, so let's go back to burnout just a little bit. And I do want to talk a little bit about it because a lot of times if you have compassion fatigue, you probably have some burnout going too. You know, it's something that's very, very common. And so that thing that we talked about, you know, you jump into it and you feel like you need to prove yourself and you know, you just work harder and harder and harder. And then at some point you may have accomplished some things, but then you kind of feel empty. You're like, okay, what next? What do I do now? Or I'm really tired of this. My family doesn't even know who I am anymore. You know, that sort of thing. It can lead to some social withdrawal. It leads to changes in our behavior. A lot of times it results in some unhealthy coping skills. And that's another thing that we need to be very mindful of. You know, we work with individuals who have so much trauma and so many things going on in their lives. And so we try to help teach them good coping skills. And that's something that we need to be doing for ourselves as well. You know, we need to be forming those healthy coping skills to help us. And so compassion fatigue is something you might hear it called secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. But it basically, it explains what our feelings look like when we have been exposed to other people's trauma and the effects that it has. Sorry, I've got my radio on, didn't even. It involves people who work directly with those who have experienced trauma. And, you know, our population that we work with has a lot of physical trauma, psychological trauma, sexual trauma, certainly. Life on the streets is not easy, as you guys know. So that consistent exposure to trauma can start overwhelming us, and it can kind of start changing how we feel about things. We can start feeling desensitized, and that is a coping skill. Whether it's a healthy one or not, I think is up for debate, but that desensitization is something that we as human beings, it's human nature to do that, to try to shut those difficult feelings out. So sometimes if you do that and you don't deal with what you're feeling, it all starts to build up, and it can start to make you feel helpless, hopeless. You can start feeling feeling like you are not very effective at your job. You start losing hope that you can actually help certain individuals. It's just something that you feel physical effects as well as mental effects. And there's a good chance also that the people around you, maybe your family or your support network, they're probably feeling it too. They're seeing you going through it, and they feel like something's going on with you. And hopefully, if they are a good friend or a family member, they'll point that out to you very gently and say, hey, you know, do you know this is going on? So we talked a little bit about this, but why we are vulnerable to this, it goes back to that compassion, and that compassion is a double-edged sword. It is both a feeling, and it's the feeling that we have towards others. It's that caring nature that we have. It's probably the thing that brought us into this line of work. And I actually had one of the funders for my program. We were talking about some of the case managers on the team for a study that we're doing. And, you know, I give him an update every week. And after the one meeting, he said, those case managers, they're like superhuman, aren't they? I was like, you know what? They are. They absolutely are. It takes a special person to be able to do the things that you all are doing. And also, I think this may be a good place to kind of point out, the world that we work in is kind of a smaller world as compared to other types of careers. You know, when you think about how many people do you know outside of your immediate work environment who do this kind of work, you know? How many people do you know work at a homeless shelter or are out doing outreach or are doing case management for individuals who have been on the streets for 20 years or more, and have experienced a tremendous amount of trauma. So it's something that we have to be mindful of, that because sometimes it's hard for others to understand what it feels like to work with individuals like that. And so we are our very best support system when it comes to things like that. So, so it's something I think that is important that we kind of develop some language around and talk about, so that we feel free to openly express our feelings about it and know that it is healthy for us to talk about it. We don't have to hide it. And also a lot of us have experienced our own trauma, and that may be what led us to this type of work. So we bring our own experiences into the relationships that we have with our client. We are highly trained to use those experiences to help other individuals. But again, it's a double-edged sword. It can, that the other side of that sword can come back and cut us pretty deeply. So we have to guard against that. Our natural compassion can lead us to taking on other people's trauma, directly taking it on. And we'll kind of talk about some of the symptoms that you might see later on. So what are the symptoms of compassion fatigue? They are, I will tell you this, there are a lot of them, and they're very different for each individual. There are some that are very common. But there are also some that we won't talk about today, but you might recognize that and say, oh, like I might need some help. So the little bubbles on the bottom, the reduced empathy, emotional exhaustion, that's a big one. Loss of patience. I'm going to share a story with you guys about that in a little bit. Irritability, cynicism, and possibly some anger. And cynicism is one that I kind of want to highlight a little bit, because it's something that it's easy to fall into that trap of feeling cynicism. So when we feel cynical about something, we start to believe that the individuals that we're working with are really only out for their own personal gain. And if you put that into context, of course they are. These are individuals who are living in a very stressful and traumatic situation. Many of them have been on the streets for many, many years, and so they have developed these survival skills. And these survival skills can come across to us as being as though they are ungrateful for our help, or they may cuss us out and call us every name in the book. There's a lot of things that can happen that can make us look at our clients negatively. And when we start feeling like that, that's one of the bigger ones to watch for. I think it's important that when we work with our clients, we understand where their minds are in the moment. We have a lot of people who come in and out of the shelter. As you can imagine, sometimes tempers flare, especially when it was so hot the last couple of weeks. We would have people coming in, and they're very impatient trying to get into the check-in line and go through the security things. They get a little snippy with us sometimes because it's a process. And so we have to keep in mind that, you know what, if I were in that position, if I had just slept outside and it was still 100 degrees at 4 a.m. And I finally get a chance to come into the shelter and get some water and some food and a little bit of rest, I might be a little snippy too if I was trying to get through that line and it was kind of, taking a little bit of time. So we have to remember that these are coping skills that these individuals have learned over time that have helped them survive on the street. It's not personal. I can't tell you how many names I've been called, and they weren't Kelly. They were other names. It's not personal, and it can feel like that. It definitely can, but it isn't. And so we have to guard against that. So the low patience thing, I think a lot of you guys, I've actually worked with a lot of you guys and have certainly come into contact with a lot of you all. But during the pandemic, I was involved in a couple of emergency housing projects, and they were amazing and wonderful. And I have never learned so much in my life. And that is one of the most valuable experiences, both of those some of the most valuable experiences I've ever had. But during the second one, it was getting a little hairy. I was tired. I was working a lot of hours, but I also was working with a lot of people who had a tremendous amount of trauma. And I knew I was kind of starting to get a little bit of compassion fatigue, thought I kind of had it under control. And then one night, evening, it was 7:30 in the evening, we had a gentleman who was staying at the hotel that I was managing, and loved this guy. He was just amazing. He always helped out, always did everything, but he also worked during the day too. So he would get up in the morning and he would go to work, and he would work very long hours, and then he would come in the evenings. We always held food and stuff for him. So one night he comes in, and it had been a particularly hairy day for me. And I see him walking towards the elevator to go up to his room, and the elevator doors open, and then they started to close again before he got to them. And the doors closed, and he ran towards it and tried to get the elevator stopped because he really wanted to get upstairs. And he had a little temper tantrum, kicking and not throwing things, but just mad. And I happened to be walking by. I was like, hey, can you cool your jets a little bit? And he was like, no, I cannot. I have had a really crappy day, blah, 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 this and that, blah, blah, blah. I, like 10 seconds later, all of a sudden, I heard words coming out of my mouth that I don't know where they came from. And I was shocked by my own words. I heard myself saying, oh, you think you've had a hard day? Well, guess what? You haven't had to go clean up this vomit over here. And you haven't, and I was like, I was arguing with this guy over who had a worse day. That was the biggest red flag. I was like, oh, and I caught myself within the first couple of sentences, but that's the exact moment that I knew that I needed to step back and take better care of myself. I've all the training in the world to never get into power struggles with our clients, to never talk to them like that. And it just, bam, it was there. And so I apologized profusely to him as soon as I realized what it was. And he was just the greatest guy. And, he forgave me, thank goodness. And we talked again the next morning. I wanted him to understand that that was not okay for me to do that. And so, he was great. But I want to share that story because this stuff can sneak up on you. This stuff can happen to you before you even realize it. So it's important to kind of know those warning signs. Sometimes the warning signs or the symptoms of compassion fatigue can look a lot like PTSD. We can actually start having flashbacks. Clients a lot of times will share very vividly the traumatic experiences that they have had. And we can start taking those on and having our own flashbacks from them. We can start to ruminate on them and imagine what that looked like and felt like. And PTSD can do some things to you. It can make you very jumpy and very nervous and not be able to sleep. And for me, it made me a little bit cranky. So it can feel like PTSD. One of the unfortunate things is that a lot of times we blame ourselves for it. A lot of times we will compare ourselves to other people. We see these superhuman things that they're doing, and we turn that back on ourselves and say, well, they're doing it. Why do I feel this way? Am I a bad person? Why am I, I'm not sure I can help these folks anymore. I'm not sure I'm being very effective at it. I'm not sure that I'm really making a difference here. Do I even deserve to be in this position? And I strongly encourage you guys, if you start feeling like that, stop yourself immediately. We as human beings are not built to take on other people's trauma. A lot of you probably have some trauma training and understand what it does to our brains, what it does to our clients' brains. It literally rewires them to think a different way. And so we cannot blame ourselves. We can have a bad day. Somebody else is having a good day. Well, maybe the next day that person's having a bad day and we're having a better day. So never compare yourself, and it definitely is not your fault. It doesn't mean any sort of weakness if you start feeling overwhelmed with compassion fatigue. And then compromised care. That's another reason I wanted to share that example of when I told this guy his day wasn't as bad as mine. It's something that we can start compromising the level of care that we deliver to our clients. And that goes totally against why we got into this field of work. We want to help people. But if we get into this place where we're overwhelmed, it can interfere with how well we take care of our clients. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. Okay, so just some more symptoms. I don't want to really read them off to you one by one, but somatization, this is where we start feeling physical effects of some emotional turmoil. So headaches, nausea, digestive things, having difficulty sleeping or going home and sleeping too much. It can be things that it's your stress manifesting itself in your body. You can start to doubt your competence. I know I've certainly been there. We start to feel hopeless. We can start to feel like, you know what, I'm working this hard and I don't feel like I'm really accomplishing anything. And someone shared with me, and I can't for the life of me remember who it was, but someone shared to me when they were finishing their master's degree, that one of their professors said the most profound thing to her that kind of changed the way she looked at all this. And that is that going into this field, working with individuals who experience trauma and hopelessness, we get to see the difficult stuff. We get to see the trauma. We get to see all these bad things that have happened. We struggle with our clients to get things accomplished. With any job, it's you take one step forward and two steps back sometimes. Sometimes it's not easy, to work in this job. But it is what we don't always get to see is the ending results. So we may have clients that we've worked with and we see either a little bit of progress or no progress at all. And maybe we've worked with them for a year or two and we feel disappointed. But you know what? Like in the next 6 months, they might actually get housed. Something good happens, but you aren't going to be there to see it. And so it's really hard when you are experiencing the difficult part with a client and you're working so hard, but you don't always get to see the result of your hard work. Maybe that client moved on to a different client manager, or, like in my case, I've changed jobs. I see so many folks that I used to work with in other programs that have come here, they've been housed, whatever. It is so joyous to be able to celebrate with them and see what came of that. In some cases, I've met people I haven't seen them in 3 years, and I see them and they're housed. And I can't tell you how happy that makes me. And it's very motivating when we see that this does result in things. We just may not be able to see it in the moment. And when she shared that with me, I was like, that's really very true. And it's something that we have to always remember. It doesn't matter when the good things happen for the client, you still had a hand in that. Even if you don't see it, you still had a hand in that, and you need to understand the good work that you've done. Sometimes we can avoid clients if we don't feel like we're making any progress with them. We might avoid 1 or 2 specific clients. We might start avoiding clients altogether. We start to feel like, maybe this is not the right career for me. A lot of self-doubt. Feeling out of touch with reality, having difficulty making simple decisions. That is definitely one that I experienced. I mean, very simple things, and my brain just felt so foggy. I really struggled with that. Sometimes we miss work. The last 2 are really important to talk about. Self-medicating. It's easy to go home and sit on your couch and watch TV and pour a glass of wine and to relax. That's perfectly fine, as long as that one glass doesn't turn into 5, which happens. It can easily slip up on you. Before you know it, you're drinking a lot every night, or doing other things to try to cope with your stress that maybe aren't the most healthy ways. So we have to watch out for that. And impaired boundaries. This is one of the most important ones that I want to share with you guys. Impaired boundaries happen when we stop separating our personal life from our work life. and that's really easy to do. It's one thing when we may work in the evening just to get caught up on some paperwork or whatever. But if the work that we're doing with our clients is following us home in our minds, and we're going home and we're thinking about them all the time, or we're doing things outside of our normal work day for them, things like that, we have to watch for that. And that's something we'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. But that kind of, we need to look at this as an ethics issue. Compassion fatigue is an ethics issue because it can lead to clouded judgment. We think that this is only something that affects us internally. We may not think that others can see what's going on with us. We're holding it all in, but that can result in impaired boundaries, and that can cause some other issues. So when we start clouding our judgment, we can run into legal issues, certainly ethical issues, standard of care for our profession. That goes right back to when, I told the guy, hey, I had a worse day than you. That's, I know better. That is a standard of care that is social work 101. But my standard of care for him was lower. And so, I just point that out because it's not always easy to recognize when we're doing that. And we can cause some damage to clients. And I won't spend too much time on it, but I'll tell you that I haven't seen it happen really often, but I actually worked with a guy who he worked overnight at a housing, not a shelter, but a housing type thing where they had overnight guests. And he was just the greatest guy, just thought the world of him. And I still do. But he started forming a friendship with one of the clients that lived there. And before you know it, they were in a relationship, and they were in a sexual relationship. And I couldn't have been more shocked when I got the call that I needed to let him go. And when I talked to him about it afterwards, he said, here's the thing. I know all this stuff. I knew that it was that it wasn't smart for me to do that. But I was so caught up in the moment of helping her, helping this person, that it just morphed into a different type of relationship. So it can happen. And that was clearly very damaging for the client. This client was very vulnerable. She did not feel like she was taken advantage of, but at the end of the day, he was in a position of authority, and that was wrong. So it can happen. And so I always want to tie this back to ethics, or compassion fatigue being an ethics issue, because it can result in that. And I think it's important that we recognize that. So, well, we'll get to the self-care thing, but don't ever feel guilty for exercising self-care, because you're preventing that exact situation from happening. So more about boundaries. Setting healthy boundaries is one of the most important things that we can do to avoid compassion fatigue. We see these folks sometimes every single day. Sometimes we spend an entire day with them. Sometimes, we get close to them, and naturally we care, but we have to be very careful about how we are presenting our relationships with our clients to the client. It's very easy for clients to misread things or misunderstand what our relationship is. I have a guy who comes in here. He has some cognitive things as well as mental illness. He wants to call me mommy, because when he comes in, he knows he can get help with clothing and things like that. And so he just straight out called me mommy one day. I was like, whoa. Call me Kelly, please. So I kind of went through the whole thing about, why it's appropriate, for him to call me Kelly. Well, can I call you stepmom? Nope. You can't. So he's looking for a mother type figure. We can't be that for them, and it's easy to fall into that. That's one of those things we have to have a lot of self-awareness about how our actions are affecting our clients. I cannot tell you how many times I've said the phrase, I'm not your friend, I'm your friendly professional. And, most clients get that. They understand it. Some still want to test those boundaries with you. We aren't being mean. We aren't being uncaring. Those are professional boundaries that are put into place to protect both us and to protect the client. And so it's really important that we maintain those boundaries. Psychic numbing, this is something that I've just recently started learning about, and it's really, there's a difference between psychic numbing and just denying all these things that are going on and rejecting all these other feelings. So psychic numbing is something that we can train ourselves to kind of dial down those empathetic feelings when we're working with a client. We don't ever want to get rid of our empathy. We don't ever want to get rid of our compassion. But it is a way to train ourselves so that when we are working with clients, we're keeping that at kind of that arm's length distance. Again, it's not that we aren't caring. It's that we are saying, okay, listen, here's the relationship we have. I am here to help you meet your goals. I'm not here to do it for you. I'm here to walk alongside you and support you and get you plugged into the right resources so that you can reach your own goals. When we start crossing some of those boundaries, it can be hard to stop them. Once we've kind of crossed one boundary and the client sees us in a different way than what they should, it's kind of hard to go back. And so it's a good practice for us to find some ways to kind of dial back those empathetic instincts. And so I've got lots more reading on that to do, but that's the gist of it. And one of the things that it drew my attention to it is you can become this feeling of being paralyzed, this feeling of not being effective at things can really slow down the progress that we're making with clients. And so, yeah, there's more. I'm going to learn more about that. And when I do, I'll certainly share that with you guys. We need to recognize that we have limited control over people's pain and suffering. And that's hard. I've got some young people who come in here, and especially like, those of you who work for youth services too, you've got some people who come in who have had tremendous trauma in their life. Sometimes it's hard to believe some of the things they tell us. It's just so bad. And so we can't change what happened to them. We can't change that past for them as much as we would like to. We can't take all that pain away. What we can do is help them find those healthy coping skills. We can help them overcome those emotions themselves. But we don't have any control over what happened to them in the past. We only have control over how we interact with them now. We've already talked about, empathy is both a feeling and a skill. And I think if that's the one thing, if you guys take anything away from this training, that's probably the thing I want you guys to remember most is, we use our compassion, we use our empathy, we use our own sense of self to help other people. And that can be a slippery slope. So, we have to get right with what our roles are with these individuals so that we can be guarding ourselves. Set realistic goals for yourself regarding your work. We aren't going to save the world. We're going to help some people. We're going to make a huge difference. And we do. Every single day we make even if we don't even see the difference we're making, we do. But we're not going to solve all of the world's problems today. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And so we need to be realistic about what we can and can't accomplish. And it's hard because, we are in a position where our job is to help people, to empower people to reach their own goals. And we may know that all we have to do is step in and bam, we can make this happen for them or whatever. But that's not what we're here for. That's just a quick fix. We are here to teach them how to accomplish their own goals and, get the things that they need for themselves. And that, when we start seeing them be able to do that, that gives us a tremendous amount of feeling of accomplishment. And that's a great feeling. But we have to be realistic, because if we think that we're going to get out there and we're going to solve everybody's problems, that's setting ourselves up for failure. When you're at work, be at work. When you're at home, be at home. And that takes some practice. It takes some practice to remind ourselves that, when we're here at work and we're giving it our all, we're doing everything we can. But when we go home, let's be at home. Let's leave all that work behind, to whatever degree that we can. Let's not bring those things home with us, because we need that free time. We need hobbies. We need those things that nourish and fulfill us, so that we can deal with the next day, so that we can deal with the trauma that other people are bringing into our lives. I've started a ritual. When I get in the car, I've got about a 15-20 minute drive home. I immediately start my winding down process. I don't take phone calls during that drive home unless it's something I really need to take. I just turn my radio on and I let my mind wander. I let my mind just decompress, so that by the time I get home, I'm in a little bit better mental position. I'm not worried about, what was happening. I am then able to give all of my home life to my home life. I'm able to give myself to my husband, to my family, to taking care of my house, taking care of my pets. And it's helped, and so I encourage you all to find some little rituals like that help you turn off all those feelings that we can bring home with us, all that stress that we can bring home with us. Take some time for yourself and just mentally unwind. I want to make a special note here. We have a lot of peers working in this field, and I cannot even tell you how much respect I have for the individuals who choose to come into this profession and use their own life experiences to help others. I treasure what they bring to our team, to any of the teams. But the boundaries for peer support specialists are very specialized. That is a very special relationship. It's a different type of relationship. So individuals who are certified peer recovery specialists, they get some training. They get some really good training on how to keep those boundaries in place, because it's difficult first for the person who's a peer, because they're dealing with, hey, I might be triggered. This person is going through the same thing that I went through, and this could trigger me, and this could bring back a lot of emotions of my own, and I want to make sure and deal with those. That's also, as far as what that peer relationship looks like with the client, it's different than just a regular case manager. And I don't mean regular case manager like that's not something special, but just, people who aren't peers. So that, and I won't get into too much of that, but that is a very specialized position. The boundaries there are very important, and they're also they're important because that position can easily lead to your own trauma and into compassion fatigue. One of the most helpful things I have found for me, and we all have the things that we find helpful. It's different for all of us, but one of the most helpful things for me was to remember to focus on the client's strengths, not their trauma. Because when I get into, down into those feelings of trauma with them, and we're kind of working through some of that stuff, if I focus just on their trauma, all I do is feel bad for them. All I do is feel sympathy, those things. That's not what I need to be feeling with them. Empathy is great. We don't need to be, we don't need to be feeling the same feelings as them to be effective. And that's something that it's easy to forget that clients, we can still help our clients without getting too entangled with them, and it also helps us remember that if we focus on their strengths, they may start seeing those strengths too. They might not even know what their strengths are. They may not even know that what they just did was amazing. The fact that they've survived on the streets for 20 years, that's amazing. That takes a very smart person to be able to do that. So when we start focusing on what they can do, and we start focusing on the things that make them unique and special, and when we start focusing on the things, the skills and capabilities that they do have that are going to help them, we all of a sudden start seeing them in a different way, and we start focusing on those good things instead of focusing on the horrible things that have happened to them. We focus on the things that, the skills they have that can help them overcome those feelings. that is a way that we model things for our clients. You know, our clients look at us, whether we know it or not, we are always modeling behaviors for them. And so when they see us pointing out their strengths, they're a little more likely to look back and say, oh, you know what, that is kind of cool. I did that. I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was, or I'm a little smarter than I thought I was. And that in turn can help lead to success, because we all need to have that confidence that we're capable of overcoming difficult odds. If we don't have that hope, we're not even going to engage. But when we have hope, we're much more likely to start working towards our goals and accomplish them. So what else can we do with compassion fatigue? This is very important. Recognize when you need help and ask for it. It is not a weakness. It is not a bad thing to ask for help. It's the most important thing that you can do. Again, you might have some people, you may not even realize that you have compassion fatigue, but your coworkers might be looking at you going, hey, you're different. You've changed some things, or that's not the way you used to react to that. You know, and if somebody tells you that, it's hard sometimes to look inwardly, but we need to do that. Or it might be that we recognize ourselves. Like when I told that guy his day wasn't as bad as mine, I immediately knew that was a bad deal. So I knew that was when I need to ask for some help, and I did. Accept that it's okay to take a break. You know, we all have vacation time and we need to use it. We all have days off. We need to use them. Sometimes we might need to take a break from just, you know, we can still go to work, but maybe we ask for a different assignment for the day. If you're client facing and you know that you're struggling that day, is it possible that maybe you could be doing some desk work that day, or ask a teammate to help out or whatever? But it's okay to ask for help and take a little bit of a break, you know. Understand that these feelings are very normal. When you're starting to feel overwhelmed, you're starting to feel stressed, that is perfectly normal. That's how our bodies are built. Those somatic symptoms that we have, that is our body telling us, hey, something's not right here. We are not built to handle all this trauma, you know, and so we can start feel it coming out in physical ways. Know that we all feel it, know that it's very normal, and there's no shame in it at all. Develop those positive coping strategies. You know, we help our clients find those healthy strategies. We need to find some of those ourselves, and those are different for everybody. This is actually why I wanted you guys to write down what was your first emotion when I say the word self-care. I will share with you my first emotion. Still to this day, when I hear that word self-care, I immediately go, ugh. Is just, if I hear that word one more time, that somebody, you know, if somebody tells me to practice self-care one more time, I'm gonna pull my hair out. I didn't know how to do self-care. You know, when I hear the word self-care, yoga, you know, go do this, go do, you know, yoga doesn't work with me. Come on now, it hurts. I tried a lot of things, and I encourage you all to try a lot of things too. But that word became something that kind of caused a little bit of an angry reaction from me, because I was in this place where I was like, I can't even get my job done during the day, and you're asking me to go to a yoga class? No, that is not self-care for me. It doesn't work. All that did was stress me out more. For someone to say self-care stressed me out totally. And so it's actually a very good thing. Self-care is a really good thing. But what works for one person doesn't always work for another person. I hear yoga is amazing, and I'm sure that it is. I just never figured out how to do it. And I'll keep trying, but it was stressful for me, not stress relieving. I did learn how to do some meditation, and I almost gave up on that too. I always thought, you know, when people talk about meditation, I envision somebody sitting cross-legged with their hands out going, oh, you know, I can't do that. But I just can't do that. And it didn't work for me. And so I actually read a book that was really incredible about a guy who was doing the same thing. He was an on-air national level news broadcaster, and he had a panic attack on air. And he showed the video of what that looked like, and it was heartbreaking. But he started his journey with learning how to meditate, and it was a journey that made sense to me. I don't sit with my legs crossed and say, oh, you know, it's something you can do anywhere at any time, and it takes practice. So you start with 5 minutes, and you know, then you build it up to 10. There's apps that can help. So that is something that works for me. It has been life-changing for me to learn how to do it the right way. And so that may work for me, that may not work for you. You know, going for a run or doing a crossword, hobbies, whatever. You have to figure out what that self-care routine looks like. What works for you, not what works for me or anybody else, what works for you. For some people, it might just be having an hour in the evenings to sit and do nothing, do a crossword puzzle, unwind. For others, it might be physical exercise. It can be anything. But I think the most important thing that I learned was these are everyday habits that we need to get into, because by the time I was in the middle of all this stress and all this fatigue, I didn't have a good self-care system set up. And so it was too late to create something new. It was too late to, you know, just say, okay, I know how to handle this. But had I had a good routine in place that I followed and I knew worked, I think it would have helped me tremendously. And so I think the trick is you figure out what works for you, and then you practice that on a regular basis so that it becomes habit for you, and it becomes something that you're setting expectations for others. You know, it can be hard to set boundaries with our families and say, hey, listen, I just need an hour this evening. I'll help you with your homework later, or I need 30 minutes or whatever. It's not being selfish. It is being a human being. And so we have to give ourselves space for that. We are human beings. We are not robots. You know, so I very strongly encourage you to figure out what works for you, and then practice it every day. Excuse me. We talked about developing those coping strategies. So here's something I want to share with you. Most of us have access to an employee assistance program through our work, through our insurance. Those things are amazing. I had never used one before. After I told a man who was homeless that my day was worse than him, that was what I did next. Was I called and I said, I need to make an appointment. It was amazing. They're highly professional. I don't want to share this with you because I was a little nervous to call them. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know. You know, I was nervous, and they were incredible. They were very professional. They were very discreet and private. We set some things up over the phone. I went in for one face to face, and then we did a lot of stuff online. Best thing I ever did. I needed that, and I didn't know how much. I think everybody's EAP programs are different, but for mine, I got like 10 free sessions of therapy, or it was paid for by the EAP, which was amazing. And I would definitely encourage you all to look into that if you need it. That help is there for many of us. Another thing that I said earlier is this is not a large, we don't have a large cohort of people who work in this industry. So we have to be each other's support system. We have to be each other's sounding board. We have to help take care of each other. And so I think it's really important for us to have this open conversation about what compassion fatigue looks like, how it's affecting us, how it's affecting our job and the way that we deliver services to our client, and that we're able to talk with each other about it. It's in a safe space where you can say, okay, I'm feeling like this, and hear the same thing from your coworkers or your cohort, and work through some of that stuff together. We have to be each other's support system. And so, if you can find a way to meet with a group once a week, once a month, or maybe you just have a really good friend at work and you guys regularly go to lunch and discuss some of these things, it's really important, because it's not easy for people who don't work in this industry to really understand what this feels like. But when you can talk to another person who does know what it feels like, it's a little more freeing. It helps us see that, hey, we're not the only ones. We're not alone in this, you know. And then anytime you have a particularly traumatic event, please immediately get with your supervisor and debrief about it. You know, first of all, they need to know what happened, you know, but also that's the place where you start to say, wow, I just was part of something that is extremely difficult to deal with. And I need to talk through it, or I need maybe an hour or two just to go away for a little bit and deal with this. So when you have those kind of conversations with your supervisors and your managers, you can build that space with them that says, okay, hey, listen, I can see that you're having a really tough time. Why don't you go take a 2-hour lunch? Why don't you go in your office for a little while, turn on some music and just process it, or whatever the right thing is that you guys decide. But it's really important that you're talking to your manager about it, so that they're aware and they can help. Okay, so I will end by saying, well, there's some resources I'm going to show you here in a second. The good news is we don't have to make a choice of staying in this and not being healthy or leaving it altogether. We can continue to do our work. We can continue feeling this compassion and being very effective at helping people without sacrificing ourselves. There is help out there. There are resources for it, and we really need to be educated on those. So I'll tell you some of the places that I go to. My favorite one is compassionfatigue.org. And I put it up on the screen where you guys can see that. This was a lady who started this. She's actually written several books. She's got a lot of really good information, but she wrote a book about her journey through compassion fatigue and how she learned how to take better care of herself. So that's one of my favorites. Good Therapy, even though it's for therapists, it has a lot of really good information on compassion fatigue that you can go out there and this one may be, well, no, I think the next line down, you can go in and do a self-assessment. But Good Therapy is a really good one. It's for professionals who work in this field, and so you can get some really good tips there. Again, the Employee Assistance Program, those are golden. Those are a miracle, and I highly encourage you to use them. There is a website that you can go out if you're kind of wondering if you have some compassion fatigue going on. You can go out and you can do a little self-assessment. Now, I'll tell you, if you even have an inkling that you might have some compassion fatigue, you probably do, you know, and hopefully you're at a place where you can get in front of it. But you probably are there if you're wondering if you have it. There are tons and tons of statistics on compassion fatigue. If you go out to National Institutes of Health, you know, we know that it's very common, so I didn't want to get into all the statistics, but it is very, very common, and they've got some scientific studies on what it does to us. So I think I'm kind of a data nerd, so I always think it's, you know, fun to look at that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not fun information to see that everybody's burned out or have compassion fatigue, but, you know, those numbers really do tell a story. So, all right, I would love for you guys to share what was your emotion when I said the word self-care. I'd love for you guys to share kind of what some of your responses were. So can they unmute, Erin? Or is it better to do the chat thing? I'd like to hear.
Either one will work.
Side, okay. I thought, yep. Expensive. It can be, yep.
Well, hey, good morning. I like to prime the pump, but I thought about this new promotion with my job and just how I wanted to decline the promotion because I understood self-care. And so I thank you again. Apologize for being late in, had to download the app and thought I had it. And so I'm an advocate of self-care. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah. Relaxing. Okay. All right. So it gave you a positive emotion. That's awesome. Preached. Massages and relax. So I get excited but expensive. Vacations. Yep. Vacation from a vacation. I totally agree with that. That's a lot of work. Decompressing. Okay. So for some, that word brings up very positive emotions. For others, it's like, oh, if I hear that word one more time, you know. So who has some things they want to share as far as the things that you do for self-care? Does anybody have a routine that's really worked for them? Or any activities that have really worked for you? Relaxing my mind. That takes practice, doesn't it? Yeah. Going outside, love. They call it nature bathing now. It's got a buzzword. That's awesome. Overwhelming. Morning walks. Yeah. Yeah. Golf. Okay. That's one that gives me stress because I'm not good at it. Hiking. Love hiking. Outside. That's a great. So you're saying, Sherelle, that you go out when you start feeling, you just go and walk around maybe the block or something? That's
I just go outside. If all I can do is just go and stand, I will, but I just feel the sun on my skin. I just look at the trees, listen to the earth, listen to the birds, listen to the sounds. And after a few minutes, whatever that feeling was, it went away and I can go back in and finish what I gotta do.
You bring up a good point. So one of my other jobs was I was an alcohol and drug recovery counselor, which was such a great job. But we can't, because it could get overwhelming, very quickly get overwhelming. We used to make these cards and we would put them on our little neck things, and it would be 3 things that we can do in the moment when we're feeling overwhelmed. And everybody had their own thing. For me, it was putting my headphones on for 10 minutes and blasting out heavy metal, just blast it out. So it was something I can do right there in the moment. I could just go in my office and do it, or I could walk around the building, or whatever it was. Computer games, yeah, movies, binge watching shows. That's awesome. So I'm seeing some people getting exercise, the hiking, the running, things like that. This nature bathing thing is new to me. I always call it a walk in the woods, but young people have different terms these days. So we're calling it nature bathing now, but it puts things into perspective. There have been times when I'm feeling totally overwhelmed and I'll go outside and I'll see something. I'm like, oh my God, how did the earth get created? It's, I'm just a tiny speck in this universe. And yes, what I'm doing is important, but at the end of the day, is the universe going to blow up if I don't get it done? Probably not. And so we find those ways to give ourselves some peace. Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing. That's really awesome. I actually got some new ideas that I might try. So yeah, I appreciate you guys putting those in there. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to share? I kind of went through those a little faster than I intended, but I'd love for this to be kind of an open conversation. If you guys have things that you want to share or talk about, happy to do that. Yeah, I'll send the presentation. Absolutely. Yeah. Crack my knee. Yeah, okay.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you. This definitely enlightened me a lot, and let me know some things that I was experiencing compassion fatigue. Wouldn't have thought that, but thank you for this education.
You bet. It's important that we all share with each other. We need each other. In this type of job, we need each other, and that's how we're going to be the most successful. And so creating those trusting, safe spaces is really huge. And that's something I encourage everybody to do. Yeah. Any other comments or anything anybody wants to share? All right. Well, I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate what you do. I know how hard it is. It is, not everybody can do this job, and so I appreciate you guys and what you're doing. You guys are who inspired me to get into this field. I saw the passion, I saw the drive that you have, and that's what inspired me. So thank you for that. And please, please, please take good care of yourselves and you know, give yourselves a big pat on the back for the work that you do. Even if you never get thank yous, know that our clients are grateful. I'm grateful. Your teammates are grateful. The public is grateful, whether they show it or not. You know, you're doing amazing things. So that's all I got, Erin. Is there anything else we need to do?
No, that's it. So what I'll do is Kelly, if you'll send me this information, I will share it with everyone. And then if you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to Kelly or myself, and we'll get them answered.
I will put my phone number and email address on the front of the PowerPoint. And that way, if you guys have any questions, need to call or anything like that, please do. My phone is open to you. I may not get it on the first try, but leave me a voicemail and I will call you back. So.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Yeah, you betcha. Thank all you guys. I appreciate you.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Kelly. Thank you. That was real grassroots.
Thanks. Bye.
Good.
All right.